Rock isn't dead. It's in flux.
Hi, everyone. I am Britt with Rock and Flux, and I am joined with Zai and Dan of the band Violet Silhouette. So, guys, thank you for being with me today, and I'm excited to talk about your band and your music.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Nice to be here.
So I always start off with kind of just you all giving the background of how you got started, how Violet Silhouette came to be, and kind of your background and history.
Yeah. So I think it all kind of started out, both Cy and I were DJing at a club called Respectable Street in West Palm Beach, Florida. And we had a lot of really similar music tastes. I had even a couple months before, like, I met Zy, like, I would go and hear his sets. I'd be like, oh, this is really cool. And I'd been DJing there for, I don't know, 10 years or something at that point. So we both had really good taste and appreciated each other's music. And then Zy had a band at the time called Skoros. And one day, somebody got a little too crafty with a knife and cut their finger and couldn't play guitar for the Skoros show. So I think like 2 days before, Zy was like, hey, do you think you can learn these songs? Do you think you can play? And I said yes. So I videoed him playing the songs. I took notes, and all those notes were sitting next to me. And so 2 days later, we played a show together and just had great on-stage chemistry. And we had been talking about starting a group together. At the same time, I was also talking to Justin, who's our bass player. At the time, me and him were playing in a band called Deathbirds, which never actually got anything recorded, but it was a pretty fun band. And we had wanted to do something, definitely darker, more electronic, dancier, heavier, and that kind of gestated into what Violet Silhouette was.
What has always drawn you to that type of music? Because it's very like dancey and 80s influenced. Have you just always liked that kind of music, or like what made you gravitate to having a band that creates that?
Well, for me, I think that the music has always been very special to us because I think what makes us go out, I mean, we want to go out, we want to have a good time, we want to dance, but we also want to sort of feel this sort of elation. We also want to also approach a lot of like our, I don't know, existential moodings at the same time that we're going out trying to also escape our existential moodings. So yeah, we just sort of all sort of housed it into this band. I disbanded Skoros a little bit after Dan jumped on and played guitar for probably like a show or two, right? And it was just something I needed to put away for a while now. But I still wanted to sort of keep those like industrial influenced elements. We still wanted to keep I wanted to explore more of a kind of sultry, romantic kind of thing also. And we just figured, yeah, this would be a good vehicle to do that.
Cool. So for people who haven't listened to any of your music, if you were to tell them like what song they should start listening to as a starting point, what song do you think you would end up choosing?
I mean, Strange Wind right now would be a good start.
Okay.
Right.
And that's the new one that you have that's getting released in June. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty representative, I think, of where we are now, but it's also, it's more refined. And I think it just has a great beat to it. Like that song kicks in and you just start doing something, which is exactly what we want people to do when they hear it.
And it's the first single, and you have a new EP coming out too called Fever Blue. Can you tell me about that new EP and how is it going to be more like what you've already done? Because your first EP that you released was Semi-Permanent Derealization. And I had to write that out separately because you have it all as all one word.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was like a intentional thing, but I was like, wait a minute, I know all these words, but I had to separate them out to read them.
Yeah, because when you read it, especially when we did like the album artwork, we wanted it to be one big, bold statement as, this emotion and this feeling and this disconnection that you have, and it's kind of overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And so
it was also, we formed the band right before lockdown and all that stuff happened. So it was like late 2019 when it happened. And then obviously when lockdown came and we were kind of trying to work on all this material, and there's also all this looming like sense of, impermanence and danger and death and
Doom.
Yeah, doom. And so we were like, yeah, that actually is pretty fitting title for the EP. So,
and that's interesting too. So you recorded it during the pandemic. Did you all like keep each other in the quote unquote bubble? So you actually met together to write and record, or were you doing everything kind of like remotely with each other?
We were definitely in the bubble pretty early on, because everything was, so scary.
It was. I mean, you can. I think like everybody can still, because it wasn't really that long ago.
Yeah.
But you still can feel like the news and like so much unknown. It was such a strange time in our history.
Right.
And like those first couple weeks, everyone's just like scared and like didn't know what to do, So yeah, we set up a pretty solid bubble with some other friends that we just all kind of agreed, okay, that like this is it. And if like one new person entered the mix, they were like they had to like stay outside. It was very weird. But so we're actually finishing Semi-Permanent Derealization in the early days of the pandemic. So like Justin would come over to my house, I would come over to my house. I remember there was that one night where we were recording and a car got hit by the train, like down the street.
Oh yeah. We're like right next door, essentially.
Wow.
Yeah. So we hear like all these fire trucks, all these sirens. We're like, oh shit, like something's like really going on.
Right.
So we go down the street. And so if any of your listeners are familiar with South Florida, we have a train called the Bright Line, which every week somebody steps in front of this train.
Wow.
Like nobody knows how train tracks work or trains themselves because they keep going in front of the trains. They keep driving in front of the trains. Anyway, somebody thought they could beat the train. The car, I guess, like got smashed to bits. We go over.
Yeah, you're not going to win.
Yeah, you're never going to win. The train always wins. We go over there and then we hear like one of the paramedics or something go like, oh yeah, they got an arm over here. And then we just turn around and just go back in the house.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, we started seeing, things on the ground as it was dark. We started seeing things on the ground where you couldn't tell if it was a piece of a car or a piece of a person but I don't know. It was just, I looking back on it now. Yeah. We're like, we shouldn't be here. Let's go home and just stay in the mood. Yeah. Keep recording. But it's just funny looking back on it now where it kind of, that's what we were all just sort of going through perhaps as like a society, like we were just blown to bits and you couldn't tell what was machine and what was a person or what was what. It was just this, in this dark disorientation or derealization, if you will. And I think we just sort of kept our wits about ourselves just kind of through this project. Like, admittingly, it was just sort of like, okay, well, the world's ending. I guess we should write songs because
right.
Yeah, and we kept writing. After we finished Semi-Permanent Derealization, we just kept, because at the time, like we were starting to do more show. We're still doing shows, after a couple months of lockdown, and we started to work in new songs, and that's where the material for Fever Blue really started. The first two singles, which is Strange Wind, the next one, which is Here to Demonica. Both of those we had been playing out for a while and kind of refining in a live setting. So especially like Strange Wind, working out the bass lines, working out what my guitar parts at the time were on stage, and Zai had the lyrics down, I think pretty much right out of the gate. I don't think they changed much at all because he just wrote a really good song.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you.
So like you recorded some of the stuff of Fever Blue, or at least started writing it during that time. Yeah. But how was the overall recording process of this EP different, not having to deal with the COVID aspect?
I think in a way we were both dealing with the whiplash of it, with like depression and some unhealthy coping mechanisms and self-medication and stuff. And I know we were just kind of on like, I'd be up and, Zai would be down, or Zai would be up and I'd be down. We were just trying to, the music and making this actually really kind of kept us focused on something to drag us out of like some of these really dark places that we go individually. Justin moved to Chicago how long ago did he move to Chicago? Like
Yeah,
6
I
months
want to say
ago?
like almost 8, maybe something like that.
What made him move?
Just a better opportunity. He's been playing in bands for years. His girlfriend got a really great job offer. He's going to grad school. So for him, he's doing a lot of the recording remotely and then sending us the parts, and then we're mixing it and manipulating it.
Isn't new technology great that you can do that?
Yeah. Yeah, there was something about the recording of Fever Blue that I think, yeah, what Dan to go off what Dan was saying, we're still dealing with the whiplash of it, and everyone knows that South Florida the whole of Florida, but especially South Florida, didn't really it really picked back up as far as like the workforce
Mhm.
went, but everything was so I mean, I worked in kitchens throughout that whole time, and
Mhm.
everything was a skeleton crew. Every restaurant was a
Mhm.
skeleton crew, and it was just the work that probably needed, a dozen people was being made happen by maybe half of that. So everyone was just getting like really thrown through the meat grinder. And I think I myself personally got like, I was getting really burnt out,
Yeah.
physically, mentally. I mean, there were points where I think during this process, I had left certain jobs and got unemployed via that burnout because you just kind of couldn't go anymore, so to speak. And I just there were a lot of nights that I just kind of just stayed in my room and worked on these synthesizers for hours or, transcribed certain poems into the lyrics for these songs. And then I'd send them over to Dan, and Dan would kind of rehash them in different ways to make them more maybe verse or something like that. There's a lot of introspection, I think, respectively. Like within each person had their own, like we were just sort of separated in our own sort of emotional like little prisons for some time, which and that
Our
sometimes
glass
we
cases of emotion.
yeah, and then sometimes we'd get like a recess period where we could kind of crawl out and have fun with each other and go out and talk about music and not be so god awful.
Bitter.
But yeah.
I think everybody was like that too, but I do think that it was especially hard for musicians
Mm,
and anyone that in that world because it took a while to come back. And then
Yeah.
even when it did and shows started being allowed again and things like that, people were a little too nervous, so like they wouldn't necessarily be that populated yet.
Hmm.
Now I think it's definitely back, but it took time. And for people who rely on that, it's even from an emotional perspective, rely on that.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
Well, it's like you have that catharsis between,
Hmm.
performer or DJ and the crowd and the people that are there. It's like, you're sharing this experience and this intensity, and we're giving you something of ourselves, and people are taking it in, and there's that magic that happens within that. And just like not having that was just
Right. And I wanted to talk to you all about your live show because in some of the things that I've read, it talks about, and I have a question on this, like that your shows are spontaneous and unpredictable, and there's like an electricity that goes through. And the way it's worded, do you mean electricity like that you're just experiencing from the crowd and being around other people? Or are you actually doing something that like there is legitimate electricity that like shocks you all or something during this?
I've definitely been shocked by some poorly grounded microphones.
yeah, that's true, that's fact. But I think that
That's about the extent of it. Thank
no,
God.
it's a sort of electric current that I think we feel as performers like sort of surge through us, and it expresses or moves itself in a very spontaneous, spastic, almost like
It's wild.
yeah, just it just rips through, I think, our bodies, and it just seems that catharsis or whatever you want to call it seems to come out on stage. Because I think we're trying to live in two worlds as people that have to, go to weddings and have to go to, family gatherings and stuff. And then we're also trying to honor this inner chaotic, archaic wildness that needs a home or needs a place. It needs a field or something to just lash out and run in, or else it just kind of works behind our backs and ruins our life in some way or another. So
I was going to say, we throw a lot of things too.
Oh, you
A lot
do?
of things, a lot of things get thrown. There's definitely been. I've bled multiple occasions. I know Zai has. I think he rolled off a stage a couple shows
Oh my
ago,
goodness.
which was pretty fun. I mean, for us,
So,
it
I
was.
mean, what could people expect? What would you tell people to expect from if they came to a live show? Should they be prepared for something to be thrown?
You
no,
should
we
be,
don't.
be prepared to like catch Zai at some point.
Yeah, prepare to catch me. Yeah, I don't know. We don't want to like harm anyone necessarily.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, just ourselves.
Yeah, just ourselves, and that's kind of like I don't know. We could say that emotionally too. We're not trying to hurt anyone, but we'll definitely do something, or we'll deprecate ourselves in some way or the other. But it's like my inner Catholic coming out now.
I mean, the shows definitely have, like, I'd say, because of the scenes that like we grew up in, like a real punk rock energy to them.
Like it's punk rock. We want to flail about and go, a little nuts, but then we're like, oh, but I want to feel vulnerable too.
I think like that's it's like a metaphor for just how life can be.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
How's your lights going? Come see Violet Silhouette. It's like that.
So one thing also I wanted to talk about is that you recorded a video for Strange Wind as well. I'm assuming that that's getting released when the single comes out on the 9th of June. Can you tell me about recording that video? Is that the first video that you've recorded so far?
It's number 3. So we kind of put it together a little under the gun because of how we started to, we put together our release schedule. We knew we wanted to get everything out this summer, the singles and the EP. Summer started coming faster and faster. So,
but that's how we work. I think we just,
yeah,
we kind of, when we're under the gun and we're just like making things on the fly, some cool things really start to happen. Things start to collide and collisions occur, creatively speaking, that was like, oh, that's interesting. And like I created all the backdrops for the video. And it was just sort of something I did like on the fly. We grabbed the projector and I just opened up like a Photoshop and just started like playing around with shapes and images.
Where were you all?
we shot this in it's a place called Melody Ave, and it's a rehearsal space in West Palm Beach that one of our very good friends owns. And so we had put this video together with a local photographer, videographer. His name's Roberto Badillo, and he's shot live shows for years. I think Spin Style is his Instagram.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a great live show photographer. And he had put something, and we're talking like, shit, we need a video. And he had put up a post, anybody looking for shoots or videos? And I messaged him right away. We got together, I think, a week later, and we did the video over 2 days. I think the first shoot was with Zai because I don't know, I was out of town somewhere. I don't know, something happened.
It was cool because when we got on I remember when we got on the group chat or the group phone call to kind of talk about some ideas, and he's like, okay, so what are you guys thinking? And then we're like, well, and we just started just shooting out ideas, and he was just very responsive, and he grew on those ideas that we had. So this snowballed into this really cool, I don't know, enthusiastic sort of approach to something that was kind of a little bit of, like I said, walking on the edge because of our time crunch, but we're very happy with the way that it came out.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that song the video is like a different, because the song it has a darkness to it, but it's also pretty dancey. So it is like, compared to some of your other earlier stuff, and I haven't obviously heard the rest of the EP, but it's not maybe as dark as some of it. So it has, like, I think it's like more of like an underlying element to it versus like being more of the forefront of it. And it reminds me, and I could be totally off with saying this, but it reminds me, if I had to like tell somebody what that song would sound like if they've never heard it, it's like Boys of Summer meets any Moreau song, if you've ever listened to Moreau at all.
Oh yeah.
Because it's like, it's got like that 80s feel to it,
Mhm.
but it has also that like the rhythm is a little bit more sinister. So it's like this juxtaposition of light and dark. I don't know. So I found it was interesting.
Yeah, I think that's great. We really like that because I think that we don't. Some of our work is it can get dark and so on, and some of our work is like whoa another direction. It's like whoa this is rather optimistic almost. But that's what we're playing with. Sometimes we're on the ball and we feel man I feel so inspired. I'm really I feel the pulse of these poetic surges of light and forward motion, and then sometimes it's just where you're like, where is it? Please come
Right.
back.
Yeah, that's like if you listen to like Where Are We on Semi-Permanent Derealization, like I think that song kind of has a little bit of a almost like a lightness to it.
But it's got a rhythmic aspect to it. Like that's a
Yeah.
more rhythmic song. And
Yeah.
I would say even like Any Way It Cracks, like that to me is like a very ethereal. The synth on that is like very ethereal and like airy sounding.
Mm.
So I mean, you mix things in an interesting way, and I haven't really heard that many people do anything like that. So I think it's pretty cool.
Thank you.
Do you have like any influences? Like I know that I've read about like 80s industrial type of bands, but are there any other influences that you've maybe had that people would be surprised to hear?
Yeah. So I mean, I don't think anybody would be surprised by a Depeche Mode influence, but like for me, this past weekend I saw L7, who was like, a
That's a
huge.
random one.
I know, and but they were like huge. Like when I was in like high school and stuff, they were like a huge
Mhm.
influence because I had gotten a couple of their albums, and they were just really, really good. And like, so I'm influenced by stuff like that, by pop punk, a lot of like emo in the sense of like Texas is the Reason, Sunny Day Real Estate emo bands, and less so. I find it to be quite a controversial term, but it's I'm like, no, that's pop punk, that's not emo. But that's for another. We could do probably a whole podcast on that.
Yeah.
It's coming back. I know
It is.
but people are they're starting to have like, whole themed stuff of that.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
there is nostalgia.
For me, and I guess an unlikely sort of influence would be some of the 70s Latin romantic ballads. Well, if you know me, it's not it's not unlikely, but you wouldn't maybe make the connections between that stuff and like Violet Silhouette. But a lot of that
Mhm.
stuff have like these synthesized, very ethereal synthesizer sounds, and it just comes from a place where a lot of those performers and songwriters were like, "Ow, this hurts so much, but it is also so beautiful." And it's doing this juxtaposing thing where the light
Mhm.
and the dark, but you got to accept it all and want it all, and so forth. So I was listening to a lot of that during Fever Blue, or the writing of Fever Blue.
That's cool. I always think it's interesting to ask people that because I mean, I tend to listen. I mean, I think we all do. We all listen to a variety of
Mhm.
stuff, right? It's not necessarily just one thing. And I think whether we realize it or not gets in our heads. And, we may not even necessarily notice that we're influenced by it in some capacity. So something I ask everybody who comes on the show, and I've gotten some interesting answers. So of course I'm gonna ask you all as well. Is like the branding of this show is rock is not dead, it's in flux. So what would your thoughts be on that? Do you think that rock is dead or is it still alive?
It's way alive. It's just different,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hardest. It always seems to be the hardest thing with people in certain who are really have their claws dug into a scene as like part of their identity and stuff. It's like, well, yeah, that was a great time in music, and all those bands are fucking killer, and it's great. But they can't write music forever, and if they do, it usually doesn't get better. Sometimes it does. But for the most part, like, it has to change because society is different, our culture is different. Things are always growing and shifting, and in that tension is where really beautiful art and really amazing music is made.
It's true. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I would definitely agree in saying that. Yeah, it is not dead at all. I mean, there are some pretty, peculiar things happening with, like AI making music and art and stuff like that. And there's always this threat, or that, AI will encroach on our very beloved like art form or something like that. But I don't know. Maybe we'll find a way in incorporating that in an interesting way where artists will still have, or be able to channel some kind of emotional sort of aspect to their music. Because I think that's what makes music very so important, is that there
Yeah.
is an emotional aspect to it. And unfortunately, or fortunately speaking, that's where AI doesn't seem to get it.
No, it can't. I
Yeah.
think, I mean, yes, it can be
Or a lot of
sophisticated,
other
but I
artists
don't.
don't either.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting. That is such an interesting topic to me. But and it's funny because I saw a meme that was like, well, we thought that AI was going to replace the things that we didn't want to do and like leave us to do more art. And it seems to like be
Yeah.
replacing the incorrect stuff, which is crazy. But I also think that, yes, people attach themselves to the art itself, but there is an element of the human condition and a human being behind that. And you're not going to ever get that with an AI generated being,
Yeah,
Yeah.
even if
Right.
it ends up being a hologram. Is it cool? Yeah, it is.
sure it
But
is.
that human element and like part of the human condition that we all understand with each other, like, I don't know. I think that there is an important element with that, with when it comes to like any kind of art form.
Yeah, I think what it leaves out is the, other than saying that it leaves out the emotional aspect to it, it leaves out, or what we're not getting, that it's like decaf, at best. It's like you
Right.
drink something and you're like, it
It's
it's
close.
my brain, knows that, even with like this alternative sweeteners or whatever. I mean, your brain just knows when to recognize something like sugar or caffeine or something like
Yeah,
that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and your
I
brain knows
think,
when this isn't it.
yeah, I think emotionally, our hearts or our bodies, whatever is the thing that feels something, it won't feel that passion. It won't feel, and passion as it relates to, say, suffering, which goes into the human condition for sure.
Yeah.
Um, Robots, I don't know. I guess they just don't
I
get it.
think the lawyers are also going to have a field day with
Oh
that
yeah.
because, especially the artists that are like larger and they're already having things
Mhm.
taken like that, they're not going to take that lying down. Absolutely not.
Yeah,
So
because your voice is, I mean, your voice is like,
yours.
it's yours. It's like your signature. It's
Yeah. There's going to be, I mean, that's going to be so strange because there's going to be precedent created in courts and things like that that we've never even
yeah.
considered.
See, that's one of the things, especially with this stuff coming up, and the past couple of years with coming out of like cryptocurrency and NFTs and all that. Like, I think the NFT concept super cool. I think the way it's executed isn't quite there, but what I like about like blockchain ledgers and stuff is that you could, I see it as a way for people to move forward for like copyright and intellectual property. That I created this on this date, using this software or using like this as my digital signature. And you can have like AI do the same thing or a corporation do the same thing. And I think that kind of understanding where things originate, and where the source is, oh, this came from a person. Oh, this didn't come from a person. Well, it's still pretty cool. But I like this better because it did come from a person and it does resonate with me as a
Yeah.
being.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I agree. Yeah, I mean it's all very interesting.
If I may, it's funny that we're talking about, like, computation and computers and all that stuff, because there was this moment during the writing of Fever Blue where When you crawl out of your house after, not going out for maybe a little too long and you have to go get, cheese or something to sustain your
the blinds
body
been
at
shut for several days.
Yeah, and you go out, you get your cheese, and you're in the self checkout line, and the computer's talking to you. Please enter, but you're hearing, the 10 other machines saying the same thing, and then you go to the gas station, and they're blasting a little TV screen at you, and it's telling you something that you should buy, and then there's just this moment of just of sensory overwhelm at just all this computation happening around me. And you could hear it perhaps or feel it in the noise, the ambient noise of some of the synthesizers that we programmed into the songs.
It's like subconscious.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is there anything else for listeners of this that you would like them to know what you have coming up? Do you have any tour dates planned beyond Florida or local shows? And Fever Blue, what is the date? So I know Strange Wind comes out June 9th.
June 9th.
When is the full EP coming out? Do you have a date for that yet?
I want to say August 21st.
Okay.
Whatever that week is. I should probably have that in front of me.
Certainly this year at sometime in August, and if not, early fall.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll definitely be out by September. So if you're listening to this in September, it's out already.
Yeah.
Nice.
And we're, as far as non-Florida dates, we, considering the fact that we're still kind of wrapping the loose ends for Fever Blue, we haven't really booked anything, I would say we probably need some help booking something. So if you're hearing this and you can get us out to your city or state, please hit us up. Our information is out there.
Very cool. Well, you guys have been great. Been a great conversation. I think we could talk about AI on a full episode and just discuss that because there's so many elements to it. But thank you so much for being here with me. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Britt.
On Instagram, your handle.
I think it's Violet Silhouette Official.
Yep.
I think it is. Yep. Yes.
Yep. Okay. And we also have a website.
We made a statement right off the bat. This is the official Violet Silhouette. Violet Silhouette Official. Nobody else. There's only one.
Gotta be official. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much, Britt.
Thanks, Britt.